Hello everyone, and welcome to my first ever interview series, The Legal Perspective. My name is Mario Bogdan, and I am currently in my second year of law school. I chose to conduct this interview series in order to learn more about the legal industry. There will be a variety of guest speakers, including legal professionals, trainees, law students, and more. In this episode, I'll be speaking with the amazing Phil Slurs. Phil is one of the first ever Roma trainee solicitors. Being a Romani myself, I feel so inspired by the work he does for the Roma community, and in general, just to finally see Roma representation in the legal sector. We'll be discussing some of the persistent challenges the Roma community faces, and Phil will give us advice on how to land a training contract. He'll give us a first-hand account on what it's like to be a trainee solicitor, and we'll be discussing mental health and well-being in the legal profession. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, Phil, and thank you for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for the invite, Mario.
Perfect. Just to get started, can you talk a little bit about your background and why did you choose to study law?
Wow. Yeah. So my background is that I'm Czech Roma. So I was born in Prague, and then with my family, I moved over to the UK when I was young. So that's why I've got this English accent, and I speak Czech with an English accent too. And why did I do law? That's a harder question, Mario. I think I was always good at talking. I think my parents were very aware of that, and I think teachers were very aware of that as well. And then I liked reading, I liked history, and I liked debating a lot, even when it was inappropriate sometimes. So I thought law would be a good fit to my skills. Also, coming from a Roma background, I don't think you can hide from sort of the injustices of some of the things that happen to the community, even at an early age. And I thought to myself, how best could I, help people? And if I could help people with my mouth, and not get in trouble for it, then I thought that would be a good idea. So I thought law would be a good avenue to explore.
I also mentioned that you're currently a trainee solicitor.
Yes.
How has the process been with getting a training contract?
Wow. Yeah. So when people ask me about training contracts and sort of applications, it's all a bit of a blur because you all have to do. I'm sure you'll appreciate doing it soon, Mario, when you have to apply to firms. But there's so many firms out there. So the process was difficult because you kind of have to pick what firm, what kind of vibe you want to go for. And it's very much choosing your university. It's like that. It's like choosing your school. You're going to spend quite a lot of time at this firm. So one tip I would give is make sure you put effort into looking at what kind of firm you might join. Yeah, it was a long process. I've got a list of firms that I never heard back from, or I got rejected from, and then the firm I'm at was the only firm who gave me the assessment centre and gave me an offer. So it is a tough process. I don't think it's helpful if we beat around the bush, as it were. But if you get a training contract, it's a worthwhile experience. And yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I'm in my fourth seat now, and I look back on it and go, wow, that was quite some ride.
What sort of qualities do you think make people stand out the most? There's like the generic stuff, but do you think there's anything outside of the generic stuff that could make you stand out?
What makes you stand out? In many ways, it's not standing out as well, which is important. You don't want to be odd when you sort of apply. You don't want to be forcing yourself to do things that is not comfortable to yourself. You need to be really true to yourself. I think that's a quality I would say is important. For me, the applications I wrote where I wasn't myself were the most uncomfortable ones and the ones that were probably rejected straight away. The one where I was actually myself and enjoyed talking about, things I found out about the firm or my own interests, though that was the firm that I wanted to join and I was successful at. So I think in many ways, don't try and stand out from what you don't know yourself. And I think that's really important. So be true to yourself is a really good quality. Be interesting and interested. So, there is something interesting about everyone's. You know, when people say I'm boring, you must have heard
Mm.
that so many
Yeah.
times. That's not true. No one is boring. Everyone's got something about them. So, you know, put that out there a little bit in an appropriate way, but
Of course. Yeah.
put it out there. And I think recruiters like to see a bit of personality. Um, so AI hasn't taken the recruitment process yet. So there are still human people. So remember that.
Mhm. And also, I've spoken about you writing so many blogs and articles surrounding the various Roma issues,
Mm,
being Roma myself as well.
mm.
Uh, what sort of stuff do you think there's still missing in terms of representation in the Roma communities?
Like in the law or
Yeah,
just generally
in the
in
law.
law? Well, honestly, Mary, I think it's just general representation. Having created the Gypsy Roma Traveller Society, um, that was a response to there being no representation whatsoever. So when I first joined, I wanted to join like an organization like the Black Lawyers Society or the Muslim Lawyers Network, something akin to that. Um, but there was nothing for us or anyone who looked like us or anyone who felt like us or even was an ally.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, there was no representation, and there still isn't. I have to say that when it comes to diversity pledges from the Law Society or from firms, individual firms, or even when they do the surveys, we're never really included as a group.
Yeah.
Um, so there's still a lot of work to do, and I think it's education. I think in terms of education, the general legal world is quite behind with
Mhm.
GRT, Gypsy Roma Traveller
Yeah.
rights. I don't know what's your experience with that.
Yeah, pretty much the same. To be honest,
Yeah.
trying to set up and search up any society for Roma or Gypsies or travelers is pretty much really hard. That's why when
Mm.
I went to search up the societies and yours came up, I was really surprised.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, there's actually society for us to communicate and share and
Mm.
have a voice, basically.
Yeah, no,
So,
I totally agree. I mean, at university, there was nothing, um, and there was a lack of knowledge about it. Um, I don't know. Yeah, and you're right. Yeah, there's such a lack of knowledge of it, and it is probably because maybe GRT people haven't reached those professions, which is even more reason why we should have these societies and be included in discussions about diversity or how to make universities or the legal space more open. Um, and unfortunately, we're not there. We'll try bit and bit by doing it, but I'd like to see a bigger push from people who have more influence.
yeah.
So we'll see.
Once I applied to law school, um,
Mhm.
once I got accepted, I posted a status on Facebook and just saying that I got accepted to law school. And I've had so many friends telling me that they actually aspired to be lawyers, but never had the courage to actually
Mm,
apply.
mm,
And I found it really interesting as well because most of my friends who said that to me were Roma.
mm.
So, do you think this perception that Roma feel that they won't get any education from the legal sector?
That's a really interesting question because there's a lot of research to suggest that minorities who are sort of got a history of persecution, discrimination, the children in those communities often feel like that they cannot achieve a certain level because they'll never be quite accepted.
Mhm.
Um, and that is, I mean, for every minority group, I think that's the same. I mean, I'll give you a personal example. I mean, in the Czech Republic, I went to Charles University for an Erasmus year when I was at university, and I was walking through sort of the halls to get to my lecture with my friends, um, and one of the cleaning staff at the Prague University um, thought I was part of the staff, so
Mhm.
they were asking me why I wasn't on shift, which he I mean I don't want to like racially profile here, but he was a Roma gentleman,
Mhm.
and I had to say to him in Czech, I was like, hey, I don't actually work here. I'm studying here." And his face was genuinely like, "This is very weird. Are you sure?" So I don't know. That for me was quite an interesting moment because it was coming from someone from the community as well.
Mm.
So I don't think, some people might say, "Oh, it's a lack of ambition from the community," which is in itself a racist stereotype.
Mm.
Um, but it's not. It's because simply there's not an equal opportunity that is ever open to kids from our communities. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't have a clear answer,
Mm.
but yeah, it's sad. I think it's very sad. There's just not enough opportunities for people like us. Um, and hopefully we can show people. I mean, it's great that you shared it because people can go, "Oh wow, if Mario's done it, then I can do it." And I think that's I think that you should be really pleased that you shared that because it gives people some sort of inspiration. Yeah.
Mhm. But I think also, especially you, writing so much about Roma and the issues and being an advocate for representation, many Roma will get so much inspiration from you and will feel ambitious. Whenever I look at your post, I'm always so surprised that there's someone like you who represents us. I'm
Oh, that's
also
very kind.
for that.
Well, it's very kind, but I also think it's just so necessary because there's so few of us in the legal space making a noise for Roma, rights. And it just needs to happen. I mean, hopefully you'll go through the ranks and whatever path you take, I believe, Mario, that you'll be like a vocal representative as well. And there are a few people I know in law who are trying to like come out as GRT, as it were. Um, but they haven't got there yet because it still isn't an open enough space for them. So I think it's important to be somewhat loud, um, and informative as well, um, because we just need to have that opportunity to explain who we are. I mean, that's how basic it is. People don't even know who
Real.
Romani people are.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had like, "Are you from Rome in Italy?" Or "What's the difference between Romania and Romani?" And which is they're good questions, but it just and I think I would always urge people to be humble with the responses because people who ask want to know
Mm.
often, um, but it just tells you how much lack of education there is about sort of one of the largest minorities in Europe.
Yeah. But it's also like when you fill out applications and
Mm.
you try to state where you're from, what's your ethnicity,
Yeah,
there's not even a space for you to really
no, no.
introduce yourself properly. I
Well, I
mean,
don't know
if
what you do, Mario. Do you put like other and explain? I don't know what do you
yeah,
do
I
other
usually
and
put and
explain or
expand. Usually put other and expand. It's really difficult to be honest, and especially if you look at the data and the application process. If you look at it and it says like gypsy or traveller
Hmm.
or any other white background,
Yes.
you know what I
Yeah, I'm
mean?
glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
no, I am. Yeah, I completed a diversity inclusion survey, and they're always a little bit different, sort of annoyingly different, because you become like a different identity on different things, and it will look really suspicious if someone like tries to connect the dots. But anyway, and you're absolutely right. I saw Roma Traveller Gypsy, which was great to see. That was
Mhm.
amazing. But then it was all under the subheading white. Now, my ancestors, I know for a fact, were not white. They were, and I would argue throughout history, Romani, Gypsy, and Traveller people have had anything but a white experience.
Mhm.
Um, Now, people like Tyson Fury, they look white. They are white, right? But I'm not sure it's a correct description to say you are white and then Roma. I think it's Roma and you are white. I mean, throughout our diversity of peoples, there is different shades
Yeah.
of color, and that's beautiful. But you know, again, it's the lack of education. You know, um, I've seen in Slovakia, Romani people who are darker. They're like an Indian skin complexion,
Mhm.
and then you've got on the other side, you've got sort of English Romaniacal sort of people like Tyson Fury. You've got that whole spectrum.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you feel about that, but I personally find it quite interesting that we are categorized often as white in this country, but I don't know, maybe it's just a lack of education again.
Yeah, yeah. Also, in terms of bringing up education and what type of did you? Um, I'm not sure how I should really word this. How many encounters did you actually have with racism as a Romani in the education?
Um, do you know what? I kind of hid it, so I didn't, and I'm I'm not one for praising sometimes the racial policies in this country,
Mm,
but I didn't have many problems. I think many of the problems I have still to this day are unfortunately in my home country in the Czech Republic, where somehow I get onto the cobbled streets of Prague and I am just Roma, and if I'm walking with my sort of twin brother, it's kind of two Roma guys walking down, and people look. We get followed around, shops and stuff. But in this country, in school, I think I maybe started explaining that I was Roma to people. Um, Maybe when I was like 16, going into sixth form, I felt a bit more comfortable. But even then, slurs like gypsy, which I know that's slightly controversial because some people identify as gypsy, but when it's used by sort of people not from the community in a derogatory way,
mm,
it has different connotations. So, we had a few bits like that, sort of kind of discussions that people had about gypsies this, gypsies that, or I don't want to say the word, but the P word when you like sort of they try to sort of steal things, and you know people wouldn't realize that you're sort of the actual
yeah.
Roma in the room. But the language was definitely not open enough for me to be fully open, so it was easier to hide away. Yeah,
Mm,
unfortunately. That's a
yeah.
very long-winded explanation.
But also just bringing up the word gypsy,
Mm,
I think it's so problematic, to be honest.
mm,
When this, for example, I saw so many businesses naming their businesses the word gypsy,
yeah.
and I checked on like the social media, and I looked at the comments, and the comment section was basically Romanis trying to explain to them what the word gypsy means and
Yes.
so the sort of history behind it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really problematic for people who are not gypsy or Romani and not really understanding the history of the word and how problematic it is to actually use
Yeah.
it.
Totally agree.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, so I've kind of evolved with the thought. I don't like the word. Um it gives me shivers when someone refers to someone as gypsy. But I have spoken to people who identify as gypsy who are gypsy. Um, and the name of the organization is Gypsy Roma and Traveller Lawyers Association because some English Romani identify as gypsy. You know, uh, in the boxing ring, for example, Tyson Fury calls himself the Gypsy King, sort of empowering himself with the word, which I think is quite a powerful thing to do. Um, but then again, the word for I think for a lot of European Roma is laden with sort of heavy in links to sort of slavery, sort of the trope that we steal things and you're kind of lazy and sort of got this you know it's an othering word. I think it's called an exonym, where it's sort of a word given by the majority community
Mm,
to a minority. So it's not even our word.
mm,
Um, Roma don't have the word for gypsy in their language. So I'm not a I don't speak Romani, but I do know that that is the case. But um, yeah, I have mixed feelings about it because if people want to identify from the community as gypsy, I think that's fine. They can do that.
mm,
And I'm never going to tell someone not to because that's not my place. I do have problem with majority communities using the word gypsy because it's not their place to use it. I mean, even on Netflix the other day, I saw like sort of flicking through. Um, there's a program called Gypsy, and I'm like, well, why have you called that? What kind of qualifications do you have
Mm.
to suggest that this film should be called Gypsy? I don't. I still don't. It still baffles me. Yeah, so my opinion, I don't know. It's mixed. I think it's okay for people in the community to use the word gypsy if they want to identify, but I would rather people not from use it. I consider it a racial slur. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just also touching on topic of racial slurs,
Mm,
I was really baffled by how easy it is for someone to use these racial slurs and not get accountable for it. Do you know what I
mm.
mean? Do
Yeah,
you
I
think
do.
there's any sort of guidance on people who how would you go about explaining to someone that this is not a good word to use?
Um, yeah, I mean, I have experiences like that. I mean, and I'm also not the darkest Romany man. Like me and my brother, we are not. We don't have a dark complexion. It, I often find people who are racist put a lot of effort into being racist, and they're able to racially profile someone very quickly.
Mm.
Um, and the word sican is often used in sort of various sort of versions in Eastern Europe. Um, and that word is so offensive to me because it means dirty. It means you steal. It's just so laden with sort of, a lot of people will not know that Romani people were in slavery until like the mid 1830s, I think it was, in Romania. And these words all come from that. It's sort of a horrible word. And it's used throughout, Eastern Europe. So no, how do we stop it? Again, I would go back to it. I think education is the key here, Mario. People just do not understand or do not even know that we were slaves in Europe,
Slaves, yeah.
and that this word is directly linked to that. I mean, there are various words in the English language, for example, which link back to the African slave trade, which was an awful thing. And these words are demonized completely now, and rightly so. We haven't quite got to that point with sort of European slavery of Roma people, and for me
Mm.
it's baffling because the histories are quite similar. So yeah, again it's education, and hopefully the next generation can sort of teach the elder ones to stop using words like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's also just like bringing more awareness, being more vocal about your experiences
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
And
definitely.
in terms of education, I read quite a few of your articles talking about segregation within
Yes,
the Roma communities. I know that
mm,
you're really passionate about that.
yes,
Uh, I think there's no denying in saying that segregation still happens in Europe.
mm,
And I mean, we've got like really, like, for example, cases like the DH case,
yeah.
which lays out the groundwork for people who now have a voice against segregation.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on segregation still happening in Europe, or do you think there's still any improvement happening, or do you think we are sort of still on that line of not really moving anywhere?
Um, yeah, I mean, DH is a case which is for people who don't know, was a landmark case in 2007 at the European Court of Human Rights, where it was basically said that desegregation of Roma children um, is illegal, is unlawful uh, throughout all member states of the European Convention on Human Rights. Um, Yet there has been various various incidences of it just not being improved in the Czech Republic or other parts of Europe. I mean, very recently, I can't pronounce the Hungarian name, so I won't. Um, there's a Hungarian case which has just been decided at the European Court of Human Rights in one of their chambers. And it was the 30th of March, I believe, this year. So very recently, which describes desegregation of now Roma men when they were children into separate schools. Even though a mixed school was 5-minute bus ride
Mm.
down the road, but they were placed all into sort of subpar Roma only schools. And it always baffles me, these excuses. If you read some of these cases,
Mm.
it you kind of I either have to laugh or cry because some of the excuses are baffling. Oh, it's a 5-minute bus ride. It's gonna be too much for the child to go to a proper school, or they don't want an education, or it would be better for them to acclimatise with their own kind. Sort of stuff like this is just coming from the mouths of representatives of governments throughout Europe. So has it improved? Not enough for me to see it. And I don't think enough for European monitors like charities to also say, well done, guys, you've done an amazing job. We haven't got there. Um, yeah. So, and there's another thing, when Roma children start coming to, for example, white schools, you have this process of white flight from a school. So suddenly you have parents taking their children out of schools which start, including Roma children into the school system. So again, there's this underlying prejudice within Europe and the UK, I would say, which hasn't been addressed. So once again, I mean, I'm kind of like a broken record. Once, you know, education can be sorted to deal with the base layer racism, I think we'll see results
Mm.
at other levels. But no, in answer to your question, it's still happening. We've still got cases at the European Court of Human Rights, which is just awful to read.
Mm. There's also this issue of kids, for example, from Slovakia,
Yeah,
being in a mixed school, but getting sent to I think it's now called a practical school,
yeah, okay, yeah, yeah,
but it's usually for students who have learning needs, special needs, or are not really able to perform well in the mixed schools. But
mm,
what I found baffling was there's a few, well, quite a lot of Romanies who went to special schools in Slovakia and moved to the UK, came to the UK, and suddenly they started speaking English perfectly.
yep, yep.
They they are high achievers. So where was the problem in Slovakia?
I don't know. You know what? I'll share with you a personal story. So when I was studying in Prague, I did a class with a professor called Andrzej Klipa. So if he's watching, thank you. And he did a sort of a Romani integration studies in Eastern Europe. Um, and we went on a field trip to Kladno in the Czech Republic, where there was quite a sizable Roma community, or there was quite a sizable Roma settlement. Um, and in one of those sort of kindergartens that we sort of visited, there was a predominantly Roma sort of population lots of Roma children there. And do you know what? I had children sort of on, drawings on the wall in sort of trilingual, sort of Romani Czech and English, sort of like alphabets and words and, you know, drawings and little site visits that they were doing. And children, if they're given the opportunity, want to learn. And children psychologically are like sponges. So it doesn't surprise me when given the opportunity that Roma children will excel because, well, they've never been really given that equal opportunity in the first place. So once they're taught English, like a sponge, they'll fly away with it. And you know, that's why it's so good to like start children, speaking another language early on because they will lap it all up. And you know, as the same with languages, I think it's the same with other things as well. You've got to you've got to give people opportunities to learn. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be like geniuses, because I was terrible at maths, for example, and I still am.
Yeah, so,
But at least I was given the opportunity to sort of have an education. And I have seen like various reports on BBC and like when they occasionally go to like sort of places with high Roma populations and Roma children are talking, and it warms my heart to see that they're sort of given the opportunity. And I mean, I think maybe in this country what we need to do is sort of acknowledge that we have children like this who have come through sort of almost educational poverty to becoming to a state where they're learning, and I think
mm,
that needs to be acknowledged. Um, but yeah, no, just an opportunity to learn is the key thing, and it breaks my heart when we don't when we see Roma children in that same cycle of educational poverty, because to break that is so difficult.
so
So yeah. Sorry, very passionate about that.
No, no, thank you so much for sharing so much great insight into everything. In terms of like moving a little bit back to your training contract, do you find that as a Romani, when you speak about like the Romani issues, uh, do you feel like your needs are met in certain type of way when you talk about the Romani issues, or is this still a little bit in terms of just having a voice and sharing your opinion?
I think when I mention it, so for example, recently there was International Roma Day, obviously, and the firm I work for was very good. They sort of, I'd written sort of like various literature so people could take away. They included it on their intranet, so I have no problems with that. It's just me though at the firm, so it's very. I just worry that if I wasn't there, nothing would be commemorated, and for me that's sad because in the UK there is a rich history of GRT peoples.
Mm,
Um, we have communities that have immigrated from Eastern Europe who are Roma. Um, and we are one of the largest minorities, I believe the largest minority, approximately 12 million people in Europe.
yeah,
So to have just one single voice and that voice reliant on one person um, does worry me. But hopefully, this is where hopefully we can work with universities and law firms to sort of get to a position where we can, have more than just a couple of voices, flying the Roma flag every so often. And you know, yeah, I think there's a lot to do. But hopefully we can get there, and hopefully we can speak to the right people as well and say, look, this needs to be commemorated every single year because this is our history, this is what people have done to us, this is what we're still doing, you know give us an opportunity, sort of thing. And I think stuff like International Roma Day is really important. But yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I just have wishes, I suppose.
mm, yeah. In terms of your training contract right now, I'm sure you have got loads and loads of work piles to do and stuff to do, but how do you manage your time management? Do you?
Oh, time management. Gosh, that's a question I ask myself regularly. Do you know what? You get used to it. You do get used to it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, when you hit a training contract, it's a lot of work. And most of the work within the first two seats is you trying to work out how to do things, or the things that you can do to help you achieve a result. And then when you get to your third or fourth seats, you're sort of doing the work and you've got all the bait, so you're a little bit more confident. So within that, you kind of have to organize yourself. There are going to be sometimes long hours. That's how it works. Sometimes there are pressing deadlines. How do I organize? I mean, I'm a big list writer. I write a lot of lists. I've been trying to do it online because I'm conscious of the trees, but but yeah, there is a lot of sort of list writing, and got to keep your Outlook updated, always updating your supervisors as well of how you're progressing. um I think a tip is that everyone will say that their work is the most important,
Mm,
but I think having discussions about deadlines is also a brave thing to do at first, but once you do it the first time, it's easier to do the rest of the time, so you can proper prioritize your work. um Yeah, I think everyone organizes themselves in a different way. Yeah, I was quite slow to it, but part of being a good legal professional is to try and organize yourself. So yeah, yeah, I guess trial and error.
in terms of studying at law school and
Mm,
now being close to actually working in the legal sector,
yeah.
what are some of the things that surprised you?
Oh my gosh. Surprised me. I don't. Yeah, you know what? University and work life is so different. It's such an obvious thing to say, but a lot of people do not acknowledge that. I did my LPC after a year working for a charity, and then I went from my LPC into the training contract. So I had like a little bit of a break from legal studies, and
Mm,
then back into legal studies, and then I joined the firm. Um, and it so I worked a bit before, so it wasn't as maybe as harsh a reality as some people. Um, it's different. I think time. You will get home from work and go, "Ah, I haven't quite made the gym," or
mm,
"Oh, I didn't call my friend," or "Yeah, I kind of maybe had to cancel dinner plans because something kicked off at work." Suddenly, your life is not quite, you know, under control in sort of your sort of personal aspect. Um, and I think that's just a profession, any client-facing profession. You know, I don't think it has to be lawyers. I mean, if you're a waiter, if something kicks off at work and, you know, there's a massive accident or like, you know, you have to work because someone's not coming to it, you know, life happens. And
mm,
life, you know, at university, it's a bubble. Sort of you do your studying, you know, you do your drinking if you want to go and drink, you go and play sports, you do your clubs, you go home, exams, and that's kind of everything in a bubble. I
mm.
mean, there's obviously more things, but that's an
Yeah.
extreme paraphrase.
It's,
Um, but then in the world of work, it's just you've got everything flying at you all at once, and you've
mm,
got support, but it's also on you to try and support yourself as well. Um, so yeah, I guess maybe the big thing is that you're not spoon fed a lot of the things. And I would happily admit that it's quite a rude awakening. So yeah, yeah.
uh, so where do you see yourself in sort of like the next 5 years or 10 years,
Oh my God,
perhaps?
Mario, like interviewing me. I love this. So where what is my plan? Well, I'm coming up to qualification. So for people who don't know about sort of the legal process, it's to qualify as solicitor after you've done your degree, you have to do, well, it was a legal practice course. I think it's an SQE now, and I'm
Mhm.
not particularly au fait with how that works. But and then you have to do sort of a 2-year training contract of practical sort of experience. So I'm at the end of that. So I'm doing my last 6 months at the minute, and I qualify hopefully in September. So I would like to go into litigation. I think that's what I would like to do. Um, so I think the short-term goals are to qualify, get all my paperwork in on time, um, and you know really gather those skills to become the best legal professional I can, and learn from other people. I think in the far future we'll see what I can do with those legal skills. I'm very open. You know, you can't ever tell what's going to happen in the future. Um, so yeah, I think for the short term, I'd like to qualify and see what I can do, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, so it seems like a very long time since university, and you'll look back at your university, Mary, and go, "Wow, that was fairly recent," but it feels quite a long time ago now for me. Yeah,
In terms of when you were in university, did you make the choice to become a solicitor in the university or after? Because I'm sure you have any ideas of being a solicitor or barrister or
yeah.
choosing to those two?
Everyone has a phase of wanting to be a barrister. I think everyone, and then the actual barristers are the ones like I don't want to say never came out the phase, but it was, you know, they've obviously got that real passion to go and be barristers. Now, for me, I for a while I thought I wanted to be a barrister, and you know, I went on my year abroad, and I thought, well, you know, what if one day I didn't want to do law? You know, maybe the skills I get from being a solicitor would be more like would maybe fit with what I would maybe want to do in the future. I don't know. I'm, you know, I didn't want to shoebox myself too much, and what was it, shoehorn yourself? I can't remember the phrase.
Mhm.
Um, you know, see, that's why I'm not a barrister. I can't think linguistically on my feet. So, and I think there's a different type of working. I didn't want to necessarily be self-employed at a young age. Kind of scared of that, to be honest. And yeah, I kind of didn't. I think maybe I looked at sort of becoming a barrister as not being aligned with what I wanted to do maybe in the future. So I didn't pursue that. But I mean, by the looks of it, it's a flourishing profession. It's a colourful profession, and I would urge anyone who wants to go for to be a barrister to go for it. I mean, I have no side of preference. I do still think it's a bit weird in this country. We have a split between barrister and solicitor.
Um,
You know,
I
in
think that
Europe.
should be more linked. We should be working much more together.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, part of litigation, obviously training and litigation, there is a lot of working, solicitors working with counsel, what we call them counsel, barristers. Um, and, you sort of, they, we give them work, solicitors give barristers work often, and it does sometimes work vice versa as well. But so you do often work with barristers because you're on that same sort of litigation team. And it's nice to see sort of the other side. But yeah, it still baffles me. For example, in America and in Europe, you do one qualification and you can go into the court and into the firm. So in
Mm.
this country, we're a little bit more, I think, traditional with the roles. Um, yeah, I think it's purely personal preference. Yeah, I mean, barristers. There's a different type of energy with barristers. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a different style of working, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. As barrister, you almost become an actor.
Yeah, maybe. I
You,
mean, I have no idea. So I I've been to I mean, I haven't been to any trials while I'm my training contract. Hopefully I can go in my final seat. Um, but having gone to sort of, I guess we've all kind of maybe sat in at court, I don't know, before, and just to observe how it all works. And it is amazing how they command the amount of paper they've got in front of them and can just answer the questions from the judges, very complicated questions sometimes. Um, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I enjoyed mooting, but I got always so stressed over like even fake cases. So I was like, you know what? I don't think I can live like this.
yeah,
But some people love it. Some
yeah.
people love it, and they're so good at it. So those are the barristers, solicitors. I guess that's the split. Um, but yeah, I don't know. At your university, is it an even split of people who want to do sort of barrister work or solicitor work, or?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably a even
Yeah.
split. But I find right now there's more barristers who want like people who want to become a barristers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think what would be nice at universities if you've got the commercial firms and you've got other firms and then you've got chambers coming to speak to students. There are other professions that you can go into with a legal, you know, you can become a clerk, for example, for a barrister's chamber. You can become like a legal executive if you want to be. You can go into compliance. So there are other legal avenues. I mean, it'd be good maybe for like law schools to sort of branch out a little bit and show the full smorgasbord
Mm.
of legal employment. But yeah, those are the two major ones, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm sure you've spoken to so many people from the legal profession and working with people from the legal profession. What sort of advice did you give? What do you think was the most valuable or insightful?
Honestly, this is going to sound like Disney and a bit cheesy, but um, just to be yourself. I think it's really important not to lose yourself when you go into, especially the corporate world, and any job actually, where you're sort of looked at and your performance is judged and it's a business and
Mm.
etc. Um, it's it's sometimes difficult to behave like yourself. And there's that people have watched Suits and suddenly think they're like Mike Ross and
Yeah,
saying this. That's not how it works.
yeah,
People like working with people. They don't like working with enemies. So
yeah,
that's a really important thing to remember. Just people will like you for you. Obviously tone down like really weird things about you. For example, I wouldn't dance at work 'cause it's atrocious. But I I like to think I'm myself at work. I like chatting to people. I like meeting people who want to come into the profession. So, remain yourself, remain true to yourself. I think that's really important. That was a very key piece of, you know, advice from a solicitor at the time at a law fair. And once I knew that, I thought, like, I'm going to apply to the firm I really want to join,
Mm.
um, like that. And, the application seemed to be okay. um, but yeah, I think being yourself is really important. I think, also don't doubt yourself, don't undersell yourself, because it's very easy to think, oh, that person's better because X, Y, and Z.
Mm.
Just ignore everyone else when you're doing an application. Just concentrate on yourself. I think that's the as it's also one of the most important things. Just you need to concentrate on yourself because it's already so competitive that you might as well not be an enemy to yourself as well. And I think that's really important. I mean, I was always told by my rugby coach at school, if you don't back yourself, no one else will.
Yeah.
So there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also in terms of again of your training contract, how many law firms did you apply to?
Do you know what? I've actually got a file on my computer, and it's as someone with like slight OCD, I have got like rejected, never heard, accepted, and in the rejected and I think I applied to about 25
Wow.
over a span of 2 years.
Mm.
Now, in my second year, I did a scattergun approach, where basically I applied everywhere. Magic Circle, Silver Circle, local. I applied everywhere. And that's the wrong thing to do. That is the wrong thing to do. I went on my year abroad and thought, right, I need to look at these firms a bit more because I had a bit more time. And I got a list together about 10 more firms that I think I wouldn't mind training at. And none of them were Magic Circle. So don't go a scattergun approach. Again, don't look at where other people are applying to either. Just go with what you feel like.
Mm.
And it might not be a high street name, you know? Um, and you might be really, really happy there. So a training contract is a training contract. You'll be in a very, if you get one, you'll be in a very fortunate position where someone is, paying for your legal education and is providing you assistance, hopefully. Um, but you need to cherry pick the ones that you think you're going to be happy at.
Mm.
Go be cheeky, message people on LinkedIn who work at the firms who are newly qualified and go, look, I'm thinking about applying. Could you tell me a bit about how you found it? You know, turn the networkies into networked kind of
Mhm.
thing. So I mean, I get a lot of people asking me on LinkedIn, oh, how is it to train at 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 the firm I'm at? So just I think doing a little bit of research about where you think you could be happy is really important. Um, yeah, I mean that's the advice I give.
No, it's perfect advice. Also, as law students, we are usually really programmed to, study hard, get really good grades,
Yeah.
apply to law firms. But in terms of your mental health, you're not really,
Mm.
there's not really any sort of guidance on how to, for example, deal with rejections.
Yeah.
How do you go about if you're receiving so many rejections? I'm sure it must have had some toll on your mental health. How did you deal with overcoming those obstacles and moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so when I came to like doing my, sort of second stage of applying, I still didn't have my training contract. So I was in my sort of final year, my fourth year because I did a year abroad. So yeah, it was a little bit pressured. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm in a position where I've never really suffered from um, mental health issues. I put it down to sport. So I used to play rugby. I played rugby for about 11 years. Um, so I suppose when you got loads of rejections and stuff, you take it onto the rugby field and tackle a few people, get a ball in your hand and sort of march through a couple of tackles. I don't know. It was quite good to clear my
Yeah.
head. Um, but no, I do know that other people took hits to their mental health a lot more, and still do. Um, the mental health provision at university is not great. I think, there are long waiting lists. I know friends who have waited months and months and months, and then offered finally when they finished their degrees some sort of help. Um, and it's always very important to make sure that your mental health is protected. If it's got to a point where your mental health is so damaged from applying everywhere, take a break. Even if it's you missing the recruitment cycle that year, your mental health is something which you need to protect. There will always be an application process for law firms. There will not always be maybe the strength of your mental health. So I would really prioritize that. I, I know it's easy for me to say, but it wasn't easy getting all these rejections because sometimes you're just sat there going, well, what am I going to do now? Got to start all over again. But I'm a great believer that things will work out. And destroying yourself over things that will happen again is not going to help anyone, and especially yourself. So yeah, you're right. The mental health provision is not very easy. I'd also like to see the Law Society sort of maybe produce some sort of, you know, recommendations for firms of how to deal with easing people with their rejections, because we've all heard the phrase there was a high quality this year and blah 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 blah. But bad news.
Yeah.
That bad news is still going to be received as like, oh, I'm rubbish.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. And I do wonder if there's a better way, maybe that firms could break the news.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's competitive, but it doesn't mean it should be unkind. So yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and in terms of just motivation, the motivation factor,
Mm.
what sort of things do you usually do to pick yourself up and move forward?
Um,
What is your source of motivation?
Source of motivation to pick myself up. You know what? I actually don't know. I don't know. Um, I wanted to become a solicitor. Hopefully, I will become one. And I guess that want of getting to the end goal
Mm,
was stronger than maybe some of the put downs that I got from rejections. Um, so I always had that end goal in mind. And yeah, I mean, sport and making sure I, had time with friends at university. In an application process, that's actually quite important to take a little bit of a break sometimes.
mm,
I took a break in my last year from applying to various places because I just wanted to like recoup mentally um, what I wanted, maybe, and
mm,
then looking at the firms again. And yeah, that meant I missed some firms I applied to, but I I was in a better position to go off and then apply to other firms once I had a little bit of a break.
mm,
Um, I think maybe making time for yourself kind of made me want to renew going for it again. Because if you keep on doing it and keep on doing it and keep on getting rejections, it's easy to see why people give up. But if you go and step back and think, now why do I want this? And then you go, right, well, I want this because I've always wanted to become a solicitor. That's
mm.
good enough. We just need a bit of a break to sometimes rethink that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I would like to ask you is what type of advice would you give to any law students or anyone who's looking to get into the law?
Um, well, that is such a massive question. Gosh, what kind of advice? I think I think if you want to do law, I think it's good to do a little bit of research before, you do a degree or GDL or SQE or whatever you have to do now, um, about whether you actually want to do law, because it is a very unique profession.
Mm,
There are unique pressures there. Law firms, are very competitive. Barristers' chambers, I would say, probably even more to get a pupillage of any kind. So you know, if you want to go for that, do it, and it's a rewarding profession. It will stimulate you. I love the profession, so if you want that, go for it. I would also, I don't know, I don't want people to torture themselves thinking that they should be doing something. If you've done law, you don't have to do law. Okay, I've got friends who did law degrees and were like, nah, actually, I don't actually want to do law now because I didn't like any of it, or I don't know, I would have done a different degree or something like that,
Mm,
So what's my advice? I think don't kid yourself. Really, really think about what you want to do. Be true to yourself, and
mm,
don't do things because other people are doing them. If you don't want to do law after a law degree or GDL, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't be. You might think it's a waste of money, or because of our fees, or you might think other people might tell you that as well. But it's your life, and you can always step back and go, look, have to be honest with myself. Is that for me? Is it not for me? You know. So I think being honest with yourself is very important.
mm,
Be aware. Go with it. Go into the profession with open eyes.
mm,
Um, yeah, and also, sorry, another one. When you get to a position of sort of work, of achievement, for example, whether you've got a training contract or you're coming to the end, make sure you make time to help other people who were in a similar position to you. I think that's a really important thing to do.
definitely.
Um, so yeah, and also when you're in work, treat everyone with respect. Everyone with respect. You know, if you don't treat people with respect as you go up the ladder, when you come falling down the ladder, no one will like you. So
Mm,
so I think those three things: treat everyone with respect, go into the profession with your eyes wide open, and be honest with yourself, I think is really important. So yeah,
mm.
there you are.
Well, it's such a great advice. And
Yeah,
first, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and speaking to me.
no
Uh,
worries.
I had such a great talk with you. I also wish you all the best with your law career. I'm sure
Thank you very
you'll do
much.
amazing things, and you are doing amazing things for the Roma communities. I find you a source of inspiration.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'm inspired by any Romani or Gypsy Roma traveller person who's open about being at university, wants to inspire other people. So there's inspiration, with people getting on with the work and also making time. And I think you're a great example of that too, Mario. So thank you very much. And I hope the legal perspective kicks off on YouTube. I'm really looking forward to our episodes.
So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.